Hello everybody. Have you ever thought how would you grow your business when the business environment around your business is completely unfavorable? Today we are going to discuss over this. But before that, let us first understand what does business environment mean? So, business environment is basically anything which is outside the control of business enterprise, but it can adversely affect the business like political situations, technological innovations, market competitions, and so on. Now, I am going to tell you a case study of a food product company which can give the most appropriate answer to our question. So, let's get started. The story starts on 25th of June 1975. The Indira Gandhi government officially declared a nationwide emergency. The fundamental rights were curbed, the press was censored, and within a fortnight, the livelihood of 620 million Indians was at stake. Little did they know that the next 21 months of their life would be known as the darkest chapter of history of the Indian democracy. And all of these was happening during a time when the India was already witnessing a socio-economic crisis. During this time, let alone business prosperity and even survival was considered to be a miracle. Now, all these dark situations where most businesses were shutting down, there was one such incredible businessman who turned this very same emergency into a business opportunity and built a business empire that now has a revenue of 1000 crores. The businessman I'm talking about is none other than Mr. Sadanand Maya and his company Mavali Tiffin Rooms, which is popularly known as MTR. To know how Maya sir turned this economic nightmare into a business opportunity, we have to move back to the rich history of MTR, which dates around 1924. This is when Maya family started the MTR restaurant with the vision to serve most authentic, hygienic and the tastiest South Indian food to its customer. The entire family was so dedicated to their profession that even during the post-independence time, when the country was witnessing a political turmoil, they still served the most authentic, hygienic and the tastiest South Indian food to its customers. Within a few years, the restaurant turned so popular that it became hotspot for tourists, television personalities, and even film stars. But after 5 long decades of prosperity in 1975, when the emergency was imposed, the family hit a dead end due to the socio-economic crisis. During this time, apart from emergency, India had already seen two bad agricultural years and due to the formation of OPEC, that is the Organization of Petroleum Exporting Countries, the oil prices had quadrupled and the inflation in the country had skyrocketed to 15%. The situation was so bad that the government had to stop all the new construction work. They frozen the wages and salaries in the public sector and imposed compulsory savings on the income tax payers. And all this meant that every single rupee was a lifesaver for a middle class person. And it obviously meant that rarely anybody ever went to a restaurant. On top of that, the government required every restaurant to conform to the prices set by the government, and it was practically impossible to run a profitable restaurant business with those prices. For example, under President's rule, the price of idli was clipped to 10 paise from 25 paise, while a cup of coffee, which costed 1 rupee, was to be sold for just 25 paise. Now, when something like this happens, most of the restaurant owners do either one or many of these three things to survive. And this is something that you would have seen even during the COVID-19 crisis. Number one, extreme cost cutting and fire all their employees. Number two, they indulge in adulteration and serve extremely low quality food to their customers, which eventually leads to health hazards. And number three, they just shut their shops altogether and wait for the situation to get back to normal. And this is exactly what the most restaurant owners in 1975 did, because they saw no other options to survive. But you know what? Even during this time, MTR Foods still serve the most authentic, hygienic, and the tastiest South Indian food to its customer without compromising to their quality. And now, just that they returned most of their employees and built a supply chain that was so robust that when the emergency was lifted, MTR went on to become one of the most successful food companies in the country. Now, let's get back to our question. What exactly was this strategy and what was so special about it? As it turns out, when the government imposed the prices, MTR restaurant started bleeding. They were losing out 25,000 rupees on weekdays and lost up to 1 lakh rupees during weekends. But even during that time, Sadanand Maiya sir was not willingly to compromise on his family business values. At the same time, he did not wanted to fire any of the employees because they stayed loyal to his business for decades. So you know what? He took a bold step to shut down the restaurant altogether and made three strategic changes to his business. Number one, he realized that in spite of emergency, the demand for food did not go down. It's just that the purchase power of consumer had declined drastically and the supply chain of the restaurant was too costly to actually cater their demands. So, to reduce the cost, he moved from cooked food to packed food. Because of this, the heavy cost and loss due to perishable items was completely eliminated. On top of that, instead of adulterating the costly ingredients, he changed the ingredients altogether. For example, they moved from rice idlis to rava idlis to make idlis cost effective. And even today, rava idlis is one of the MTR's signature dishes. Since he could not compile by the prices imposed by the government, he turned the same restaurant into grocery store and started selling food mixtures via grocery sales. And last and most importantly, he trained his entire staff to build an efficient supply chain to make packed foods and sold it at affordable price. In the corporate world, this is what we call reskilling. And that is how, ladies and gentlemen, MTR was able to survive emergency without compromising to its business values. And guess what? As soon as emergency was lifted, MTR restaurant reopened. But this time, along with restaurant, they already had a fine manufacturing chain, which produces nothing but high quality products. Soon enough, they extended to multiple food mixes like pickles, spices, and even special spice mixtures. Fast forward to today, MTR has emerged one of the finest food brands in the country, with a revenue of almost 1,000 crores. And MTR export its product to 21 countries including US, UK, Australia and Japan. And most importantly, it has successfully stood the test of time for 97 years without ever compromising its values and even during the COVID-19 crisis. 10 years after Maya sir stepped down, the company is still setting very high standards for change management in the industry. While most of the companies were clueless and struggled to keep their supply chain and intact during the COVID crisis, MTR Food had already doubled their inventory level from 14 days to 30 days capacity. And while the first lockdown was imposed on 25th of March, MTR rigorously started preparing for the crisis way back from 10th of March itself. And this is when none of us had a clue that our lives were about to change forever. And that is now time and again by turning a business threat into a business opportunity. MTR has consistently set a benchmark for other brands to follow and for future entrepreneurs like you and me to learn from. Now, there are three very important lessons that we need to learn from this iconic case study. Number one, and this is something that has been followed by Dhirubhai Ambani so better than anybody else, wherein his policy says, every time you see market crisis, you need to realize that your competitors are facing the exact same crisis as you are. The question is, are you going to see it as an obstacle and succumb to it, or treat it as a business opportunity and get way ahead of your competitors? Number two, money can build a company, but it takes guts, qualities, and values to build a brand. And last and most importantly, as much as the internet is filled with Americans and European business case studies, we often fail to realize the fact that India has also a long history of political and economic crisis. And the diversity has been so much that let alone business, even staying alive was considered to be a big deal. But even during these times, we have had some incredible entrepreneurs who were able to build the business empire and had established a golden legacy for us to follow. And we being in the Indian market needs to pay a very close attention to these lesser known gold mines because they have got nuggets of wisdom that can turn us into extraordinary business leader of this country. That's all from my side guys. Thank you for watching video.